Have you ever wondered why, despite your patience, your allure seems to fade just as you think it's strongest? Most women chase intensity, believing that constant attention and reassurance will solidify desire, yet the truth is far more counterintuitive. What pushes a man toward distance is not your indifference, but your surrender of self, your submission of inner fire for the comfort of validation. Carl Jung believed that the shadow, the unacknowledged aspects of ourselves, holds the key to authentic connection, and today we'll explore why that matters more than ever. In the quiet spaces between words, where conversation falls into silence, the subtle dance of desire takes place. It is here that the psyche whispers truths often ignored. Desire thrives on mystery, on the perception of autonomy, on the tension between presence and absence. When a woman attempts to fill every moment with herself, she becomes visible in form but invisible in depth, leaving the man with nothing to explore. Your magnetism is never diminished by your absence, it is amplified by it, a paradox of human craving. Each woman who fails to recognize this unconsciously floods her interactions with signals of neediness, those little tremors of, please stay, notice me, care for me, and in doing so, she anchors desire to obligation rather than fascination. A desire rooted in obligation is fleeting, brittle as dried leaves in autumn wind. Yet it is not merely absence that commands power. It is the presence of a woman fully aware of her own internal universe. Men are drawn to the uncharted depths, to the quiet intensity of self-possession. When a woman abandons the need to control his attention, she becomes unpredictable in the most magnetic way. Her life, full and unrestrained, hums with energy he cannot possess, only witness. Desire, therefore, is not a response to the volume of attention given, but to the quality of energy maintained. The woman who cultivates her inner realm, who allows herself the space to be whole independently, is never depleted by longing, she is nourished by her own essence, and he senses it even without words. Consider the intricate ballet of projection. Men unconsciously cast onto women fragments of their own shadow, their unresolved desires, their unclaimed power. A woman who dissolves her boundaries, who mirrors his every need in search of approval, becomes a canvas smeared with predictable reflection. The mind craves contrast, and when contrast is absent, fascination evaporates. In Jungian terms, desire emerges in tension, in the interplay of opposites. Your independence, your refusal to compromise the quiet sovereignty of your own identity for fleeting moments of attention, forces a man to confront the part of himself he has not yet owned. It is in this confrontation that desire ignites, not in the meekness of surrender, but in the challenge of recognition. He must reach, stretch, and move towards something that will never be fully grasped. But what about control? The instinct to guide the narrative, to anticipate his every move, to secure the outcome before it manifests. Such exertions, though well-intentioned, suffocate desire at its root. There is a profound distinction between nurturing attraction and orchestrating it. When a woman substitutes authenticity for performance, when she masks the natural rhythms of her being to fit an imagined expectation, she exchanges fascination for convenience. Desire cannot flourish where authenticity is absent. Like a delicate flame, it recoils from smothering hands, flickers in response to hesitation, thrives only when given the space to move freely. Even the smallest acts betray this truth. The unrelenting need for affirmation, the subtle questioning, the concealed resentment for moments left unattended, they are all threads that unravel the tapestry of long-lasting desire. Each attempt to tether him emotionally through the architecture of dependency is a silent erosion, a siphoning of the magnetism born of self-possession. Men are drawn not to scarcity alone, but to the tension between scarcity and abundance, the push and pull of energies that respect both presence and distance. Some women believe that transparency is always the highest form of intimacy, that revealing every thought, every fear, every insecurity will deepen connection. And yet, the paradox lies in the human psyche's love for discovery. Desire flourishes not in total revelation, but in the rhythm of unveiling, the slow, deliberate disclosure that teases the mind and stirs the imagination. A woman who exposes all too soon, who floods the emotional landscape with unfiltered dependency, unknowingly collapses the tension that fuels fascination. The mind, when presented with the entire map at once, ceases to explore, curiosity dies where certainty reigns. You must recognize that withholding is not deceit, it is the cultivation of intrigue, the preservation of self as a sacred, unexplored territory. Equally perilous is the impulse to perform worthiness. Many women, conditioned by societal expectations, labor under the misconception that their value must be demonstrated through compliance, accommodation, or endless gestures. Yet desire is never won by servitude. A man is unconsciously attuned to authenticity, and when he perceives the transactional nature of affection, I am desirable because I give you this, or because I am available at all times, he senses the evaporation of mystery. Attraction is a reflection of energy, not obligation, it responds to the vitality and sovereignty you maintain, not to the tally of favors or acts of service performed. You must understand that the magnetic field of desire is energized by presence, by autonomy, by the unspoken knowledge of your worth, rather than by the visible ledger of efforts and sacrifices. Another subtle but powerful erosion comes from emotional turbulence. Women often equate emotional transparency with incessant sharing of inner storms. Anger, anxiety, jealousy, these are natural currents of the human soul, but they require mastery before being offered as signals to another. When your emotional state becomes contingent upon his actions or attention, desire becomes tethered to volatility. The male unconscious, while drawn to the intensity of emotion, simultaneously recoils from the unpredictability that threatens his own equilibrium. The lesson here is not suppression but sovereignty. Your emotional tides belong first to you, navigated with awareness and self-possession, so that your presence becomes a force of intrigue, not instability. Consider the unconscious traps of overcommunication. In the modern age, the impulse to text, to comment, to ensure constant visibility seems benign, even expected. Yet desire is often extinguished not by absence, but by saturation. When every moment is filled with your digital presence, when every thought is instantly shared, the psychological space he needs to long for you diminishes. The mind thrives on subtlety, on unanswered questions, on the occasional shadow that hints at depth but does not fully disclose it. Your restraint is not coldness, it is a conscious cultivation of the magnetic tension that makes presence luminous. And what of over-anticipation? A woman who predicts, arranges, and molds interactions in an effort to secure attention inadvertently removes the challenge inherent in desire. Fascination is not sustained by certainty, it is nourished by the unpredictable interplay of freedom and attraction. In giving too much predictability, too much of yourself on demand, you risk converting fascination into familiarity, a quiet erosion of longing. A man's unconscious needs room to project, to pursue, to stretch towards something he perceives as autonomous and vital. By honoring the mystery within you, by allowing your life to unfold without choreography for him, you create a gravitational pull that cannot be manufactured by any effort or pleading. Finally, the undercurrent of self-neglect undermines desire more than any overt act. A woman who abandons her own passions, her self-care, her personal pursuits, in favor of centering him, silently signals that her inner world is dormant, available only as an extension of his narrative. Desire responds to vibrancy, to the pulse of independent life force, to the unassailable sense that you are complete without external validation. Your inner richness is the soil in which fascination grows, deprive it, and the seed of desire struggles to take root. Even when a woman embodies presence, mystery, and independence, there lies a subtler terrain where desire is quietly endangered, the realm of expectation. Expectation, cloaked in the guise of hope or desire for reciprocation, binds attraction to a ledger of outcomes. A woman who waits for affirmation, who measures her worth by his engagement, constructs invisible chains around the very magnetism she seeks to cultivate. Jung observed that projections are never neutral, they carry with them the weight of unconscious needs, unclaimed power, and unresolved longing. When desire is filtered through expectation, it no longer flows freely, it becomes a transaction of energy rather than an exchange of fascination. The danger of expectation is compounded by the allure of predictability. The mind craves rhythm, yet it also hungers for contrast, for the ebb and flow that sustains intrigue. When every interaction follows a familiar cadence, texted responses, rehearsed gestures, prearranged encounters, desire stabilizes into comfort, and comfort, though safe, is seldom intoxicating. Men are unconsciously wired to pursue what challenges their perception, what provokes them to move beyond the ordinary. If a woman becomes entirely predictable, she no longer stimulates the unconscious drive that fuels pursuit, she becomes a mirror of the expected, rather than the enigma that excites. Equally insidious is the tendency to compromise authenticity for approval. Women often soften their edges, mute their opinions, and adjust their essence to align with perceived expectations. While this may generate short-term acceptance, it erodes long-term desire. The male unconscious, drawn to the full expression of life force, senses the subtle diminishment of vitality and unconsciously recoils. Authenticity is magnetic precisely because it is unreplicable, it reflects the unclaimed depths of a woman's psyche, the uncharted territories that invite exploration, reverence, and pursuit. A woman who diminishes herself, who trades the integrity of her being for comfort or avoidance of conflict, undermines the very tension from which desire arises. Then comes the quiet peril of overgiving, not merely in physical acts, but in emotional labor. To anticipate, accommodate, and soothe incessantly is to exchange the pulse of independent energy for the appearance of availability. Men are drawn to presence that is complete, not contingent. When a woman offers herself primarily as a solution to his needs, she converts fascination into utility. Desire is an energy that seeks resonance, a reflection of autonomous vibrancy. Utility, while appreciated, does not evoke longing, it evokes dependence. Your task is not to fill every void he has, but to cultivate a presence that invites him to witness your fullness without claiming it. Subtle manipulations, even under the guise of affection, carry a similar risk. A smile withheld to test loyalty, a tone adjusted to provoke jealousy, or an action engineered to gauge his reaction, all are transactions of desire rooted in control. Jungian psychology teaches that projections, whether conscious or unconscious, are not merely reflections, they are catalysts that can ignite or extinguish attraction. Desire responds to unforced interaction, to the organic dance of personalities meeting without artifice. Each attempt to manipulate the emotional currents for temporary advantage undermines the depth of connection. Fascination, unlike amusement, cannot be manufactured. Lastly, there is the danger of internal depletion, the surrender of self to constant vigilance over his responses, moods, and availability. The woman who monitors, adjusts, and anticipates at every turn sacrifices her inner landscape for the sake of his emotional climate. Jung described individuation as the process of claiming one's own psychic territory, integrating shadow and light into a coherent self. A woman who refuses this inner sovereignty, who loses herself in the oscillations of another, diminishes the very energy that generates longing. Attraction, at its deepest level, is not sparked by attentiveness alone, but by the radiant completeness of a self-contained spirit. In essence, the threads that threaten lasting desire are woven from absence of mystery, erosion of authenticity, dependence on affirmation, overgiving, and unconscious compromise of sovereignty. Each act, subtle or overt, has consequences in the unconscious mind of the man, shaping his drive to pursue or retreat. The landscape of desire is not navigated through strategy alone, but through mastery of one's own psychic terrain, conscious cultivation of presence, and the fearless assertion of inner life. Desire, at its most enduring, is nourished not by proximity, but by the tension between presence and autonomy. A woman who relinquishes the subtle art of holding space, who fills every moment, anticipates every gesture, and offers every ounce of herself without pause, risks converting intrigue into predictability. Men, at a primal level, are attuned to the rhythms of challenge and reward. They respond to the woman who embodies her own life, whose pulse beats independently of his actions or attention. The unconscious mind perceives this sovereignty as vitality, and vitality, more than beauty or charm, is the currency of lasting desire. Yet the temptation to over-explain, to justify, or to soothe fear through words is relentless. Words, while necessary, are a double-edged instrument in the psychology of attraction. Excessive explanation signals anxiety and diminishes magnetism, while measured speech, delivered with calm assurance, reveals confidence and depth. The man's mind is drawn not to the elaboration of thought, but to the enigma of lived experience, the subtle hints of life fully inhabited. When a woman allows her presence to communicate more than her words, she creates a fertile field for desire, allowing him to project, interpret, and ultimately pursue the untold dimensions of her being. There is also the subtle peril of emotional overexposure. In modern intimacy, vulnerability is exalted as the highest form of connection, yet without the framework of self-possession, vulnerability can become a liability. The woman who offloads anxiety, jealousy, or insecurity onto him without discernment inadvertently anchors desire to obligation. He is drawn into a dynamic of caretaking rather than fascination, his unconscious engagement shifting from pursuit to management. True vulnerability, in contrast, is a display of integration, a quiet confidence in one's capacity to experience emotion fully, yet without surrendering the sovereignty of inner life. Desire thrives in this delicate balance, where depth is offered, but not at the expense of autonomy. Consider the unconscious consequences of impatience. The urge to accelerate attachment, to secure loyalty, or to extract reassurance transforms attraction into negotiation. Men, unconsciously, recoil from pressure applied too soon. Desire, at its core, is an energetic pursuit, not a contract. A woman who understands timing, who allows the natural unfolding of interaction, preserves the psychological suspense that fuels longing. She recognizes that the rhythm of desire is not dictated by her will alone, but emerges through the interplay of independent energies, a dance choreographed by mystery and self-possession rather than by expectation. Another quiet underminer of enduring desire is the sacrifice of personal vision. When a woman abandons her passions, her ambitions, or her creative expression to align with perceived relational needs, she signals a depletion of inner vitality. Desire is drawn not to absence of life, but to abundance within it. A man is unconsciously magnetized to the woman whose energy radiates from pursuits beyond the dyad, whose laughter, curiosity, and intensity emerge from realms he cannot fully inhabit, yet longs to witness. The vibrancy of independent living is a silent but powerful declaration: here is a life that is complete, yet open to connection. The interplay of boundaries and freedom is equally vital. A woman who permits encroachment upon her time, space, or emotional landscape undermines the tension that sustains desire. Boundaries are not barriers, they are statements of self-worth, of inner coherence, and of the sacredness of personal energy. The man's unconscious responds to these lines, not as obstacles, but as challenges that provoke pursuit. Respect for one's own limits creates an energetic framework in which fascination can thrive, a dynamic interplay of approach and retreat that mirrors the rhythms of instinctual attraction. Finally, the unacknowledged shadow sabotages lasting desire more than any overt misstep. The parts of self that are ignored, anger, envy, neediness, unprocessed trauma, manifest subtly in tone, gesture, and energy. Men, sensitive to these undercurrents, may feel drawn initially, yet unconsciously sense the instability that lurks beneath. Jung posited that integrating the shadow is essential for authentic presence. A woman who has not confronted her hidden depths cannot sustain the magnetic pull of completeness. Fascination arises when she moves through life fully embodied, aware of both light and shadow, offering not fragments, but a compelling wholeness that challenges, entices, and endures. Even the most magnetic presence can falter under the weight of emotional negotiation. Women often seek to influence feelings through approval, reassurance, or subtle coercion, believing that guiding a man's emotional landscape will secure attachment. Yet desire thrives on autonomy, on the unforced interaction of independent forces. When a woman attempts to regulate his experience, even gently, she diminishes the unconscious thrill of pursuit. Fascination is sustained not by persuasion, but by the unspoken reality that her life is complete, her emotional energy self-contained, and her attention an invitation rather than a transaction. Similarly, the peril of overfamiliarity lurks quietly in everyday gestures. Sharing too much, too soon, dissolves the mysterious space that fuels longing. Men are unconsciously drawn to enigma, the partially revealed, the nuanced, the subtly inaccessible. When a woman exposes the entirety of her inner world at once, desire can plateau, leaving the unconscious craving for challenge unfulfilled. Maintaining subtle layers of self, giving glimpses without total disclosure, allows him to invest in discovery, to imagine, to yearn. Intrigue is a slow-burning flame, overexposure risks extinguishing it before it reaches its peak brilliance. Another delicate dynamic arises in the realm of dependency. When a woman's sense of fulfillment is contingent upon his actions, his attention, or his approval, she externalizes her inner life, tethering her vitality to his trajectory. This unconsciously signals scarcity, a deficit that invites caretaking rather than desire. Men, drawn to the unclaimed energy of life fully inhabited, sense this tethering at a level beyond words. Lasting attraction is sustained by the woman who claims her wholeness independently, who cultivates internal abundance, and who offers connection from a place of completion rather than need. Equally crucial is the subtle art of absence. The modern expectation of constant availability undermines fascination. Texts answered instantly, social media presence monitored and mirrored, and excessive engagement collapse the tension that generates pursuit. Desire, in its deepest form, thrives in space, the intervals between contact, the pauses that allow the imagination to fill, the unknown that compels curiosity. Absence is not withdrawal, it is the conscious creation of energetic space that allows longing to grow organically. The woman who masters this rhythm becomes an axis around which fascination revolves, a presence that is felt even when not seen. Consider the unconscious influence of self-sabotage through perfectionism. Women, striving to be flawless, often invest immense energy into managing impression, appearance, conversation, responsiveness, all in service of perceived desirability. Yet desire is rarely captivated by perfection, it is magnetized by authenticity, by imperfection that reflects life lived fully. The unconscious mind senses tension, vitality, and movement, not static perfection. A woman who embraces her natural rhythm, who permits herself to be complete without polish, radiates a confidence that is irreproducible and, therefore, compelling. Then comes the subtle erosion of fascination through overanalysis. Obsessing over his intentions, decoding every gesture, anticipating every reaction, converts desire into calculation. Men, sensitive to this energy, may unconsciously recoil from scrutiny, sensing the absence of freedom in the interaction. Desire is sparked not by logic, but by the unconscious resonance of presence. The woman who observes without attachment, who allows interaction to unfold without overdetermination, preserves the mystery that fuels pursuit. Finally, the quiet underminer of lasting attraction is the erosion of self-interest. Hobbies abandoned, friendships neglected, personal growth deferred, all in the service of relationship focus, signal an energy deficit. Men, unconsciously attuned to vibrancy, sense the absence of life force and fascination diminishes. Independent pursuits are the silent drumbeat of attraction, each rhythm declaring a life fully inhabited, an inner landscape rich and irreducible. Presence, autonomy, and inner cultivation create an energetic field that draws attention and desire effortlessly. Even when a woman masters presence, mystery, and independence, she must navigate the subtler realms where desire is quietly threatened, the interplay of emotional clarity and intensity. Emotional volatility, even when unconscious, can destabilize fascination. Quick shifts between warmth and withdrawal, elation and irritation, teach the male unconscious that his pursuit is a transaction rather than a magnetized journey. Jung observed that men, at a deep psychological level, respond not merely to behavior, but to the energetic consistency that reflects inner integration. A woman whose emotions are anchored in her own sovereignty communicates a magnetic pulse that is felt far beyond words or gestures. Equally influential is the danger of approval seeking in subtle forms. Compliments requested, reassurance demanded, or smiles curated to elicit validation erode the energetic independence that sustains fascination. Desire is not maintained by acquiescence, but by the silent assertion of self-possession. When a woman radiates the quiet certainty of her own worth, her unconscious energy communicates freedom, stability, and unclaimed power, forces that naturally compel pursuit. Conversely, dependence on affirmation transforms attraction into duty, engagement into obligation, and fascination into predictability. The shadow of comparison casts a hidden but potent influence. Observing other women with envy, measuring oneself against impossible ideals, or drawing his attention to external validation shifts the focus from personal presence to social scoreboard. The male unconscious, attuned to authentic vitality, senses when attention is fragmented and resonance diminished. Desire is sustained not through competition, but through self-alignment, the full embodiment of one's own rhythm, passions, and boundaries. A woman whose energy is internally sourced does not fade in the shadow of another, she expands, radiates, and invites. Time, paradoxically, both strengthens and threatens fascination. Too much availability dissolves tension, yet too little engagement risks eroding the felt connection. Desire is fueled by rhythmic interplay, appearance and absence, intensity and calm, invitation and restraint. Jungian psychology teaches that attraction is an energetic resonance, not a logical transaction. The woman who understands the cadence of interaction, who allows space while maintaining magnetic presence, creates the psychological terrain in which longing grows, undisturbed by manipulation or calculation. Moreover, overinvestment in his perspective can subtly compromise attraction. When a woman bends excessively to his moods, opinions, or expectations, she sacrifices energetic sovereignty. Desire is drawn to a woman whose life pulse remains independent, whose choices are guided by inner compass rather than reactive adaptation. Her presence becomes a landscape to explore, not a map to control. In this dynamic, pursuit is ignited by curiosity, uncertainty, and the unconscious recognition of autonomous vitality. The peril of over-communicating intentions also warrants attention. Explaining every feeling, clarifying every gesture, or rationalizing every boundary diminishes the unconscious thrill of unpredictability. Men are attuned to energy, nuance, and suggestion rather than explicit narration. A woman who conveys depth through subtle cues, through posture, gaze, laughter, and selective disclosure, maintains intrigue. Desire is nurtured in the spaces between words, in the resonance of what is felt but not articulated. Finally, attachment to outcomes quietly undermines lasting attraction. Hope for commitment, anticipation of affirmation, or anxiety over his interest converts the energetic landscape into a ledger rather than a field of fascination. The male unconscious, drawn to autonomous vibrancy, perceives this attachment as scarcity, not abundance. True magnetism arises from detachment rooted in self-possession, a woman fully present, engaged, and yet unclaimed by expectation. Desire, in its most enduring form, thrives on the interplay of depth and lightness, of engagement and detachment. A woman who clings too tightly to the outcome, whether it is his commitment, his attentiveness, or his declarations of affection, transforms fascination into obligation. Jung taught that projections of need or fear into another awaken their unconscious defenses. When pursuit is tethered to anxiety, the magnetic dance collapses. The energy of longing, once vibrant, becomes weighed down by expectation, and the unconscious attraction that fuels sustained desire falters. Equally perilous is the compulsion to overnurture the relationship at the expense of self. Acts of care, while inherently valuable, become counterproductive when they are driven by fear of loss or desire for control. A woman who constantly anticipates his needs, rearranges her priorities to align with his, or mitigates conflict at every turn, risks draining her own vitality. Desire responds not to utility, but to autonomous life force. When a woman maintains her own rhythm, her care becomes a generous offering rather than a tether, and fascination continues to grow without pressure or transaction. Boundaries, though invisible, form the scaffolding of enduring attraction. A woman who fails to assert her limits, whether emotional, temporal, or energetic, leaves a vacuum in which intrigue dissipates. Men, at the unconscious level, are drawn to those whose energies maintain integrity. Boundaries are not barriers but invitations, a declaration that life exists fully within, and connection is a matter of mutual respect rather than compliance. The dance of approach and retreat, of tension and release, sustains desire far more than immediate availability ever could. There is also the subtle trap of overexposure. Sharing too much, too soon, or too frequently diminishes the psychological allure of mystery. Fascination is the product of partial revelation, the dance between what is known and what is imagined. When a woman reveals her world completely before the unconscious pursuit has unfolded, desire flattens. The male psyche is wired to chase the enigmatic, to invest effort in exploration. Maintaining layers of self, offering glimpses rather than full disclosure, cultivates the fertile soil in which longing grows organically. Perfectionism, often hidden beneath charm and elegance, quietly undermines attraction. The woman who meticulously curates every aspect of her presentation, anticipating approval or avoiding perceived judgment, inadvertently signals absence of spontaneity and life force. Desire is drawn to presence, vitality, and the authenticity of imperfection. The unconscious mind perceives completeness, resilience, and confidence, qualities that cannot be feigned or manufactured. A woman who embraces her rhythm, including the unpredictable edges of her character, radiates a depth that commands attention and admiration. Then comes the subtle erosion of fascination through emotional turbulence. Quick swings of irritation, jealousy, or anxiety signal instability and scarcity. Jungian psychology emphasizes integration of shadow and conscious self as essential for authentic presence. A woman who has reconciled her inner contradictions projects an energy that is compelling rather than reactive. Emotional mastery, rather than suppression, communicates completeness, resilience, and magnetism. His pursuit becomes a reflection of engagement with a self-contained, vibrant force rather than management of instability. Finally, the quiet danger of dependence on validation corrodes desire. Every compliment sought, every reassurance requested, every approval craved diminishes the energetic sovereignty that fuels fascination. The man unconsciously senses scarcity and must pivot from pursuit to caretaker, altering the dynamics from magnetism to obligation. A woman whose energy is internally sourced, who cultivates richness and curiosity independently, draws him not to her approval but to her essence, sustaining desire across time, circumstance, and distance. The culmination of these subtle dynamics reveals a profound truth: desire endures only when a woman embodies the full spectrum of her being, unanchored by fear, unmet need, or external expectation. It is not in her pleas, explanations, or accommodations that fascination thrives, but in the quiet assertion of her vitality, the magnetic resonance of her independence, and the sacred coherence of her inner life. Men, unconsciously attuned to energy more than words, are drawn to the woman who lives fully, whose life pulse beats with clarity, rhythm, and autonomy. She is not a puzzle to solve, but a force to witness, a presence that calls forth engagement and longing through the power of being fully embodied. Attachment to outcome, approval, or constant affirmation is the final subtle trap to navigate. The woman who measures each interaction against imagined benchmarks or anticipated results constrains the natural flow of desire. Fascination is maintained not through control, but through surrender to self-possession. By cultivating detachment from outcome, she transforms pursuit into an unconscious dance. He engages with her energy, not her petitions, and is magnetically drawn by the rhythm of her wholeness. The unconscious mind recognizes completion, and fascination is fueled by the very independence that might superficially seem aloof or distant. Similarly, overinvestment in his internal states, attempting to manage moods, anticipate needs, or calibrate interactions, dilutes the energy that should radiate outward. Desire responds to presence, not to orchestration. The woman who observes without attachment, who interacts from a grounded sense of self, allows the natural tension of pursuit to unfold. Her energy communicates that her life is rich, her heart is sovereign, and her attention is offered without need. In this space, longing intensifies, pursuit becomes instinctual, and fascination is sustained without manipulation or effort. The mastery of absence, paradoxically, strengthens the magnetic field. Availability that is measured, interactions that are rhythmically spaced, and energy that is not perpetually on call, all cultivate the unconscious suspense that fuels pursuit. Men, attuned to tension and release, are unconsciously drawn into the enigmatic spaces between presence and absence. A woman who honors her own time, passions, and personal rhythm does not diminish connection, she magnifies desire. Each interval, each pause, becomes a silent affirmation of sovereignty, creating an invisible gravity that pulls him toward engagement. Even the smallest gestures, subtle eye contact, poised demeanor, laughter that hints at internal worlds beyond his reach, become instruments of fascination. Desire is sustained not through overt strategies, but through the energetic signature of wholeness. Men unconsciously recognize depth, autonomy, and integrity. When a woman inhabits her life fully, her actions, tone, and presence resonate with completeness, and he is drawn to her not out of need, but out of curiosity, admiration, and the irresistible pull of vitality. Integration of the shadow is the ultimate cornerstone. The fears, insecurities, and unresolved patterns that linger beneath awareness, if left unacknowledged, leak into interactions, subtly disrupting attraction. Jungian insight reminds us that authentic presence emerges through acknowledgement and integration of these hidden aspects. The woman who has confronted her shadow, who moves through life with both light and depth visible in her expression, embodies a wholeness that is impossible to ignore. Desire is magnetized by the energetic coherence of someone who has reconciled their inner contradictions and radiates both power and vulnerability in measured harmony. Finally, independence of thought, movement, and energy ensures the longevity of fascination. She does not collapse into the relational orbit for validation or affirmation, she moves through life on her own terms. Every conversation, every gesture, every shared silence carries the resonance of autonomy. In this alignment, desire is not a fleeting spark, it is sustained magnetism, a gravitational pull born from completeness rather than need. He does not pursue because he must, he pursues because he is unconsciously compelled by the energetic integrity and sovereignty that she embodies. The woman who knows her worth doesn't chase, she chooses.